OK. Bonjour et bienvenue à tous et à toutes. Nous sommes heureux de vous accueillir à la 6e session d'atelier de la série Boîte, outils en sciences humaines numériques. Je suis Jada Watson, coordonnatrice des sciences humaines numériques à la Faculté des arts à l'Université d'Ottawa. Good morning and welcome to the 6th session of the Digital Humanities Toolbox series. I'm Jada Watson, coordinator of Digital Humanities here at the University of Ottawa. Before we begin today, I'd like to start our session with an Indigenous land affirmation. Nous rendons hommage au peuple algonquin, gardien traditionnel de cette terre. Nous reconnaissons le lien sacré de longue date, l'unissant ce territoire qui demeure non cédé. Nous rendons également hommage à tous les peuples autochtones qui habitent Ottawa, qu'ils soient de la région ou d'ailleurs au Canada. Nous reconnaissons les gardiens des savoirs traditionnels, jeunes et âgés. Nous honorons aussi leurs courageux dirigeants d'hier, d'aujourd'hui et de demain. We pay respect to the Algonquin people who are the traditional guardians of this land. We acknowledge their longstanding relationship with this territory, which remains unceded. We pay respect to all Indigenous people in this region from all nations across Canada who call Ottawa home. We acknowledge the traditional knowledge keepers, both young and old, and we honor their courageous leaders past, present, and future. Welcome everybody to today's hands-on session called Seeing Your Text with our host today, Connie Crompton, who's going to introduce us to computer-assisted text analysis using Voyant, the internationally renowned Canadian text analysis toolset. Voyant tools are designed to make it easy for you to work with your own text or collection of texts in a variety of formats. This workshop will also serve to introduce Voyant Spiral notebooks for advanced analysis. We strongly encourage you to follow along with the activities as we go, and we'll make sure that any links you need will be in the chat as they're provided. And you were asked to bring in plain text copies of texts that you're familiar with, but if you don't have anything, you can find something in the public domain to download at gutenberg.org. So feel free to find something there. And I'm delighted to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Constance Crompton, Assistant Professor in Communication and Canada Research Chair in Digital Humanities at the University of Ottawa, and I should say my partner in crime. She leads the Humanities Data Lab here at the university and is co-director with Michelle Schwartz of the Lesbian and Gay Liberation Project, Lesbian and Gay Liberation in Canada Project. Speaking is not my forte today. So before I pass over the screen, I'd remind you to keep your microphones muted for the duration of the presentation, but use the chat if you have questions, and I'll raise them for Connie as we go if she doesn't see them. And so I will now turn the screen over to Connie.
Merci, Jada. C'est un grand plaisir d'être ici. Mes diapos et la présentation, c'est en anglais, mais l'utile avec qui nous joue aujourd'hui, c'est vraiment un utile bilingue et c'était fait par un francophone des humanités numériques canadiennes. On peut parler, on peut prendre des questions en français et en anglais également, des choses comme ça. So I should, yes, thank you for that introduction, Jada. Yes, I'm Constance Crompton. I'm a white, able-bodied, queer settler, first generation on one side, and sort of long-time Irish Catholic-y kind of settler on the other. There are lots of links in my slides, so I'm going to put a link to the slides in the chat. So feel free to dive in and to head into these slides because there are links in here that will be useful. All right. Well, if there aren't any questions to start, here's a quick overview of what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to start just with what is Voyant? It might be a tool set that's familiar to some folks. It might be a new one. So I'll be delighted to talk it over. And then I'm going to do sort of the three-part structure that I always love when I'm teaching, which is here are some slides about a thing. Now, here's a live demo of me using the thing, followed by okay, now you try using the thing. So this will be a hands-on DH toolbox. Then we're going to, from sort of working with Voyant's basic tools, have a quick introduction to a new tool that they've developed called Spiral, which is really designed for like sort of next level use, but also that lets you really document your code well, and can be a really good sort of experimental starting place for future projects and analysis. Does anybody have any questions before we dive in? Great. Yes, if you need text, you can get some there. Voyant also has some pre-existing corpora in there. I'm going to be working with their Jane Austen collection. They have some Shakespeare content in there as well. But this is actually the most fun if you are working with documents that you know well. So if you do have plain text or Word documents of like a letter collection that you've worked with, or your dissertation, a manuscript, that it reveals things about your text, but it also, as with all text analysis, really is the most meaningful when you know the text that is underneath the visualizations. So what is Voyant? It's an in-browser tool set designed to help you do text analysis on a corpora of text. Of course, in the digital humanities, there are lots of different types of projects. There are lots of people who are involved in edition production. There are people who do stylometrics, which is like things like author attribution based on text. There are people who are engaged in database design, in software development. So this is just one kind of digital humanities tool specifically for text analysis, finding word frequencies, collocations, graphing the relationship between parts of text. You can also do some natural language processing here. So this will be useful for some folks, depending on the kind of projects that people are interested in creating, and for folks who are more interested in, say, edition production, this might not be necessarily the tool set. This is also why I quite like the DH Toolbox format, because it lets us kind of dip our toes in to some of these tools without having to kind of like speed dating the different tool sets, so that we can find out what will be best for our own projects. So where did Voyant come from? It is the brainchild of Stefan Sinclair and Jeffrey Rockwell. Jeffrey Rockwell is a professor of philosophy at the University of Alberta and former director of the Cool Institute there. And Stefan Sinclair was an English professor at McGill. He passed away in 2020, and it's been like a significant blow to the digital humanities community in Canada and actually internationally as well. He was the former head of the American Associations for Computing in the Humanities. He was a leading light in the International Digital Humanities Organization, ADHO, as well as his work with the Canadian Society for Digital Humanities, the Société Canadienne des Humanités Numériques, and really the Voyant tool set was his brainchild and the work of his scholarship over years. So his memory really lives on in this important work. And Andrew McDonald has been the central developer on the tool set, both working with Stefan early on, as well as continuing that legacy today, including Spiral, this like gorgeous tool, which was, again, like Stefan's vision, and I think he would just be like delighted to see how it's been realized. Voyant is quite a user-friendly tool set. It has no software installation required. It works in a browser, so if people have an internet connection, it's usable. It actually does also exist as a standalone edition. So part of the Voyant developer mission is for it to be useful in minimal computing environments as well. And so you can get the USB key version and run it on one's own machine, even without a stable internet connection. In a moment, we'll be uploading text if you've brought text with you, or we can work just as our experiment with the existing texts that they have in their set. Voyant is also multilingual. So the skin that we'll be looking at now is the English one, but it's available in 13 different languages, and certainly the team has really embraced this accessibility feature for Voyant. It is also one of Canada's most successful academic software as a service services that that although it is like funded by Canadian funders, it has really quite broad reach. It's hosted on what is now Digital Research Alliance of Canada software, what used to, or platform, what used to be Compute Canada, and of any like academic software developed and hosted by Compute Canada, it has the most individual users from around the world. I think like this is like a sort of like sleeper fact about its uptake, in that I think there are lots of us who use Voyant in our research and in our teaching who don't necessarily know that like we are using important Canadian cloud computing. So if you ever do get like pings from some of the cloud computing providers in the academic setting saying like, do you use cloud computing? Does this matter to you? I think for a lot of us in the humanities and social sciences, we might think like, oh, no, I'm not using cloud computing. I just use my desktop. If you use Voyant, you are like one of those key users. So it's always good to make sure that we get those humanities and social sciences voices in there to speak to the way that we develop and use tools together. Without any further ado, let's dive into the Voyant tool set. There are two things you'll need to have open here. I'll put them into the chat. The first is the documentation, and what I'm going to put into the chat is the start guide for Voyant. Oh, yes, it is definitely good for language learners. I'm seeing your comment there, Mary Jose. It really is, and especially when it comes to like technical subjects, but also to see like how sentences are constructed, how argument is constructed, even in various languages. Amazing. And I'll put this one into. Oh no, we did the start guide already. I want the actual tool. The reason I say it's worth having each one of these open in the browser is that the tool interface isn't always sort of like directly self-documenting, and so like having the documentation open makes a big difference. So in that standard way, I am going to do a live here. I will do some things. Let me show you what this looks like on screen, and then we will have a chance for folks to try these things out themselves as well. So I would love to hear how it is going for you. But just if you want to do this at the same time, great. If your mode is more like I would like to sit and watch someone do this and then try it out myself, either mode is fine, of course. So in the Getting Started menu, you can find the documentation for all of the different Voyant tools. It starts by offering you just an overview of how to select a corpus, how to add material to Voyant for analysis, followed by an overview of the default tools that show up in the pane. And we'll be talking to you about how to change these tools out, how to extract your data from these tools, how to extract visualizations, and make use of them along the line. That said, there are lots of tools in the Voyant toolset that won't show up on this home screen. And so it's also nice to sort of work through some of these and see, are these tools that might be useful to me? Let's switch out the ones that are showing up in the default pane to use ones that might be useful. So they have some that are, say, looking at phrases. It's not in the default, but that might be of use. There are some that let you look at like word frequency and visualize that in interesting ways that are not in the like default, the default skin. There are even some like much more, I don't know, sort of like artistic and like experimental ones as well. So this is just an introductory workshop, but I would say like feel free to work your way through any of these if there are ones that that catch your eye. There's other useful guides in here for doing things like changing the language that you're working in, which is an important part of accessibility here. As well as we'll do this live as well, changing out the stop words. I'm sure if you've ever used text analysis tools before, you put things in, get a beautiful word cloud, and most of the things in the word cloud in English are the word the. Like it doesn't really always tell us very much about our text to say like the shows up a lot. the indefinite article as well, and so we'll look at some of the stop words there too. And there are other settings you can put together, like the color, so that you're getting out visualizations that might fit well in a research paper or an article, that kind of thing, as well as things like how to sort your work. So that's the overview of the how to. Let's head into Voyant itself. And so it has this sort of like tidy interface. You can put in the URL if you have the URL for a plain text document. You can also upload from your own computer individual texts. I'm going to work with one of their prefab corpora. And so we're going to look at Jane Austen's novels, but by no means is this like a like required. In fact, actually, I think anyone who has their own text with them, if you have text that you work with in your own scholarship, you will have the most fun in this workshop. I was tempted to upload my 2011 PhD thesis on the off chance that anyone is interested in the history of Victorian bodybuilding, which is what I wrote on. But it seemed like that might be a little bit too like insider baseball. So Austen's novels it is. I'd love to give just like a quick tour of what we get in the like default pane. One of the things that I think is most compelling about the Voyant toolkit and its design that we don't always see with text analysis tools is the centrality of the text itself, that this central reader pane is right at the heart of the default tool set. And it's because that really like this tool set was designed by people who are interested in English literature and philosophy, that the text itself is central. I think with many text analysis tools, you do things like, get out words that are collocated with each other, but it kind of removes us from the text. Voyant, well, it's letting us zoom out and do that distance reading, also says, as humanities scholars and as social science scholars, we are still interested in the text and we always want to be able to get back to the text itself. So this is sort of the home base, and it's giving us an overview of the length of each of the Austen novels, and we can move between them if we ever need to get back down into the text. And you'll see too, as we're working with some of the tools, we can use the part of the text, we could get back to the part of the text that the other tools focus us in on. So too, when you're finding things like, wait, why are these terms showing up together? Or this seems odd to me, let me use this as a way to develop a research question that takes me back into the text, that Voyant, from a design standpoint, is like designed to let us do that work.
We have a really great question.
Oh, I love a great question.
Go ahead. Is there a maximum number of words?
If there is, I have never hit it.
Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, part of me feels like there might be a point at which like my browser wouldn't take any more, but the standalone version of Voyant, I don't know that it has any limits. But I would invite people to like try to max it out, and maybe we can find out. Yeah. Excellent. So the other pane that is the default here is our Cirrus cloud, the word cloud, to look at like word frequency. The size of the words is relative to how often they appear in the text. I was actually like, in my misguided earlier years, a word cloud skeptic. I was like, what can they really show us? I do have some brilliant digital humanities minor students who like convinced me otherwise. Well, visualizing the topics to develop what are the topics in a series of journals from the archives. It was very good. The pane on this side is the trends, which words are showing up where or how often in each corpus. And the hover overs give us what the word frequency is, how often, what percentage of the words are the words think in the 1814 Mansfield Park. And then we have the option to really focus in on that term and to affect the other panes by clicking on them. So say I am interested in the term think in Mansfield Park, I can get below by clicking on it, this list of those keywords in context, so I can see how they're being used down below. The other useful default one here, tool here on our left is summary. This is actually, I find, very useful for my own writing, to like put things in here and to get an overview of like, what are the longest terms, what are the shortest terms, what is the vocabulary density. If you read through the documentation, you can work out which algorithms they're using to set density scores. Readability index too, there's information about which algorithm they're using for that. So that, and then also like what stands out or is odd or is underused or is not used in other texts in this corpus. And again too, it's designed to let us go back to the text. So when I click on Lady Susan, it takes me right in the central pane to Lady Susan. And I can start looking at these terms in the context of Lady Susan in particular. So that's the home base and the interface. That said, almost immediately, I'm sure folks will want to be able to sort of tinker around. So the things we're gonna like talk through in terms of tinkering in here is to say like, yeah, like let's change out the stop words. And let's change out some of the terms that we're searching on here. Mr., Miss, and Mrs. may not actually be important to my analysis, but there might be other terms, like maybe I'm interested in medical or legal language in Austin's work. And so I would want to be able to switch some of these out. We'll also check out some of the other tools that are available here in the default. So each tool has other tools you can switch over to quite quickly, but the thing I want to start with is hovering over that little question mark in the upper right-hand corner of any tool. The first lets you export either a live version of the tool, and I think it's a year that they will leave this live with no hits. If there are continue to be hits on it, it stays live. So it can be your tool, your visualizations can be embedded inside online articles and that sort of thing. You can also switch out your tools to ones that are not the ones listed here. And you can define the options for this tool, as well as that the question mark gives you information about what this tool does. We're going to click on define the options for this tool and choose a list of stop words, because this can really make a difference in terms of like what we're getting out of some of our content. You can upload your own stop word list. You can edit the list. You can also choose from their prefabricated ones from all the language types that that Voyant currently supports. So if you're working with a material in Farsi or in German or in Arabic, you can choose common stop words there. I'm going to choose the standard English ones. If I was using this for like a serious project, I would download that list and like have a look and make sure it's what I want. I might upload my own list because there are some terms, there's some works where like the repetition of the word the in the Tempest really does matter. And so I don't want to be stripping that out. In this case, I am going to go with the default English list. But if I wanted to see that list, they make everything quite transparent. So you can see what's in that list. So it's not sort of black boxed. A white list might be words that that you want to include even if they're on the stop word list. So if you are working with the Tempest, you just get your thes back in there. And you can change the font and the colors. Yeah. So I will confirm and apply globally. So it's going to apply this stop word list across all of my tools now. And so we've got reconfiguration here. I might say like, actually for me, I also know that said does not matter to me. So I'm going to edit the list. I'll add said below here, save, apply globally. Confirm. Oh, live demos, folks. There's my said is still here. Maybe I refresh. Oh, do you know what? Nope. I refresh and I go back to the beginning again. Anywho, So there are these mechanisms for switching out some of that text. Let's have a look at some of the other tools as well. The first one that I had promised was also changing out the terms here. Miss and think and said might not matter to me. So I might be more interested in other terms. There's at the bottom of any box that, or any tool that takes text values is a box. The pop-up menu here will tell you what regular expressions you can use in order to create a more sophisticated search. Regular expressions are use special characters in order to work with lemmatized versions of any of your words. You can see in the pop-up here that, for example, we have the chance to say, oh, okay, yeah, find me the word coat. Instead, if I have coat with an asterisk after it, find the word coat with maybe other letters afterwards. So coats or coating. I can also find words that end with a certain term, and I can use exact phrases even if things are separated by a question mark. So, or sorry, even if things are separated by a space, so that I can really refine my search to make sure that I'm getting the content that I want back. And I'm going to add love. I could do all, it's checking the text for me. I could do love with the asterisk would give me like loves and loved. And if I wanted love with the accent, I could get loving. And it gives me just a quick preview to say like, how many will you get back for this? So I've got love. I'm going to add marriage, again with that asterisk there. And I will also add dismay. How to get back? Oh, I might not have any dismay. Oh, no dismay. Oh, because I misspelled it. Dismay doesn't come up very much. These are happy ending texts.
We have two questions.
I'm for them.
First one, is there a way to combine terms that Voyant extracted, like Gregor and Gregors is the example given?
Yes. I mean, in that case, you could also just put in Greg with an asterisk. But then if there are other versions of like Gregorizingly or something that you don't want to get, that won't help. So here, reset. My browser has stopped loading. So here, move all my windows around here. So if you have a look down here below, you can combine terms by using the pipe character, which on an English language keyboard is right above the / above the return, as a single term. So if I wanted to collapse love and marriage into each other, do love and marriage, and they'll show up as a single line, like that, across the corpus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Next question. By default, is the count based on lemmas or tokens or types?
Oh, do you know what? I would have to double check the documentation. I think it is on tokens because I'm getting different counts back when I like just use the stem of the word. So I think that's right, but I don't just take my word for it. I will double check documentation. Really, the only other thing to show here is that it's easy to switch to new tools that they load automatically. I've clicked over from the Cirrus pane onto terms. This is showing me the terms over the corpus, and just to give myself a quick overview, the trend for each term, and here too, I can be doing the same thing and getting back my marriage. and kind of see what that trend is like. And then again, because it's designed to like drive us back to the text, it's showing me the high points and low points too. I can click anywhere here and it'll take me back to that particular text. It's just a side note. I mean, I love all the tools. They're each good for different things. I am particularly fond of the terms tool, especially in a classroom setting, to take a text that we're familiar with, but to look for unusual terms and to use this kind of distant reading to see where this term is most frequent, and then to like dive back into the text to say like, why is that showing up there? I had one student a few years ago who did a very like interesting like analysis of H.G. Wells' The Island of Dr. Moreau, and she used Voyant tools to help generate her research questions. She was looking at the frequency of the terms man and animal in the text, and like man starts out like it's like all through the early chapters and then kind of drops off and animal picks up again. And she said, you know, she then used that to say like, okay, I'm going to go to the chapter where these things overlap and find out like what's the sort of conflict point there and what's happening as these things transfer. So the Voyant tool set can be used to like support arguments, but they can also be used to like generate new research questions by being able to zoom out from the text, find a way then from the zoomed out view to zoom back in where something unusual or interesting has happened. So I'd love at this point just to say like, let's take like 5 minutes. I'm sure folks who are interested are poking around already, but to say like, try loading in one of your own documents. I do through back channels know that like Kyle does have a book manuscript in here, but let's just have like some open time. We can even like open the mics and just, if as folks are trying it out, we can talk it out, and then we'll turn to Spiral, this new sort of more advanced tool. Kyle, can I ask, what is your book manuscript, and are you putting it into Voyant?
Yeah, I was putting it, so I was telling Connie, I have a collection of letters to the editor that I had a student analyze, and I'm trying to reproduce his analysis. He was doing correlation analysis. So right now I was trying to get it to read in an Excel file in a way that made sense. I haven't quite succeeded, but I think it's possible. And then I just finished copy editing a book manuscript. So I have a book manuscript. I mean, like, I have my computer in front of me. I got a hard drive full of stuff.
Yeah. So definitely like any text that you're really already familiar with can make for interesting analysis in this way, in that the things that look surprising are more interesting if you know the text really well. You'll have almost like better surprises, like to sort of say like, oh yeah, I am surprised at this. Whereas if it's, you know, Shakespeare or a text, maybe if Shakespeare's like, it's not something people are familiar with, and being like, well, there's some weird patterns in here, but I'm not surprised or unsurprised. I have no sense of whether or not I should be finding these here. So yeah, working with text you know well is always the most satisfying.
Well, shockingly with my letters, I chose the letters based on the fact that they had the word oil in them, and oil is the most common word. I was shocked.
That means you are well and truly reproducing the the results.
Or it's tautological.
Excellent. Well, we can give it a quiet other 2 minutes, and then I'll turn back to the slide set. And for folks who are just joining, just in case, does Zoom show people the links that have gone before? If they don't, we'll put them back in for everybody. Alpha, please.
Very nice. So I'm using the stop words, like I edited the list that exists because I didn't realize it was going to be hands-on, and so I quickly grabbed a script from the internet. So I'm using a screen, like not as, yes, a screenplay. So I'm using Get Out by Jordan Peele. And obviously I had to edit the stop words list because there's continued, you know, at the bottom of like all the dialogues that are cut. So it was one of the main words. So I wanted to remove it. It keeps coming back. So I don't know what I'm doing wrong. But it's super interesting because the first thing with the screenplay that will pop up is you can really track what characters are appearing when. And when you remove them, then you kind of have a second layer of analysis. And because it's for a visual medium, what's really interesting is that I can see the word black in the word cloud, but it's really small. No, actually, it's not that present because it's on the screen, right? Because you can see. the Black people. So the word is not used that often. Anyway, this like I'm having lots of fun. Thank you.
That's really cool. Also, like what a way to like get at the like absences and silences in some of these cultural formations, like, which also totally makes me interested in like document history, like that, like your like insight that like, oh yeah, Black doesn't show up here because we and we know the film and we know that it's like a Black cast. That like, what are the things that like people in 1750 would know about the text that we've just put in that like goes unsaid in the text that we can't find through text analysis tools, that like as historians we need to actually get familiar with that context. Yeah, no, that's very cool. Mary should say, please.
It's a very nice tool for language learner analysis. What I find interesting, but I have some question about, is how they have the indicators of vocab density and of all these. I can't find the information. Maybe you can let me know how this was calculated. The readability text, the index of readability, all these things are interesting. That was one question. And the second question, how do you, because I have gathered a corpus of 10 small text written by learners, advanced learners, how do I compare those? Do I have to import 10 texts, or can I have merged them in one, identifying them by T1, T2, T3, etc.? So in the Jane Austen's corpus, there's different books, and you could see the books. So how do I do this? How do I structure my corpus so that it is also gives me information that I can compare?
Oh, I should have said, yes, here's how you would do that, because it is definitely important. Important. Yeah. So to get that like nice breakdown where it's showing you, each text has a color and letting you move between them and graphs each one, you do upload them each separately into here. So when you go to upload, you choose one at a time. So I've done this with the Wells text, so like one. Nope, I spoke too soon. Now it is uploading the whole thing. I should have chosen multiple ones. So here I've just got one. Sorry, folks, second time's a charm. So here, upload multiple texts. And so I would say like
have to exist as different texts, as different objects, so you compile them together. So you don't do your compilation first as a corpus and then import. I see. No. Okay.
So it uses each one then, each one to make the distinction. Yeah, between them. Yeah, that's a good question.
Thanks.
We have another question in the chat. In terms of data storage, how does Voyant work? Can we remove corpora if we reconsider? Surprise, surprise, Liz asking for a friend.
Yes.
Things that we had to talk about this 2 weeks ago.
This question about like a sensitive material and what should go where. The material does persist. So they do make a corpus for you, and your corpus gets a unique ID. And if it continues to get hits on it, it will stay up. And the reason that's the case is that what that lets people do then, we haven't talked about like getting your data out, but you can actually get the HTML for one of these visualizations and embed it on like a website in electronic format, and it will run the visualization every time someone loads the page. That said, you can also remove your content, and here too, I should have seen, I should know this question would come, that I would double check the modifying a corpus, like how to remove a corpus. And it might be a matter of getting in touch with the team. So they do flush them when they're not being used, but they're like, I would like to get this out right now. I'd have to double check.
They must just have a lot of duplicate stuff hanging around in there then.
How many times have I uploaded the Wells texts in tutorials?
When I used to run like a small activity on this in class, we used to upload the same text every person in the classroom. So there's a lot of Donald Trump's RNC speech in here. and Michelle Obama's DNC speech. Yeah, that's interesting.
I mean, really too, when we think about like, this is actually like a Canadian made high performance computing tool. Like it's designed to be like simple for us to use, but it is actually using a huge amount of like parallel processing and storage. And also too, I mean, the other thing that I think is sort of remarkable about this tool is that it is available to us for free, and it is made by academics like us. So, it's like, it may not have the same sort of functionalities that we might look for in something like Tableau, but it is designed with some of the design features we're talking about with like our needs in mind, and that this is the work of people who are sort of like no different, or well, different, and Stefan are remarkable people, but sort of no different from us, and that they do the work of getting the grants, getting the server side support to keep this alive out of their own passion and like goodness of their heart, which is, I don't know, just like remarkable as a model for sustainable infrastructure creation. That was a side rant, but I'm touched and amazed. Yes, so actually, I mean, something maybe when we do the hands-on for Spiral, I will like go and just double check, because I know there is a how to get things removed policy somewhere, but I can't tell if it's like just in the documentation or where I have seen it. So I will do a bit of a hunt about, because that is a very good question. Also, actually, Mary Jose, there was, your other question too, which I will hunt up in the documentation and elsewhere, was the like, which algorithms are folks using in order to create that readability index, for example. I know that exists elsewhere too, so I will hunt that up as well. And then also too, for one's own work, of course, but then also for working with students, it's good to encourage that like algorithmic literacy, and not just that, so that students don't have that feeling like, well, the machine said it's this, it's the same that we do with spell check, like the machine said a comma should go here, and like, now should it really? It's actually good for us to be questioning like, what are the systems underneath, and are they the ones we actually want to be using when we're deciding on readability? Excellent. Then I will here are my things you could do. You can go to Project Gutenberg if you like, so I'm going to change gears and just introduce the one of their new tools, Voyant. And Voyant continues one of these sort of ethos that is under the hood of the Voyant toolset. And that's the idea of literate programming, in which we think about tool design in a way that allows us not just to give instructions to a computer, but also to document our process, to speak to one another as humans, as well as to speak to the machine in order to create, for example, the visualizations we might like to have. As a theory and an approach, this comes from Donald Knuth's work in the 1980s, and it really underpins the expansion and growth of notebook style interfaces. Those notebooks are applications, in this case, an application that runs in a browser, but you can also, there are standalone notebook applications you download and run on your machine as their own apps, where it's possible for you as the creator to include text to yourself or to others, as well as code blocks, instructions for how to run those code blocks, notes about your thinking on this process, notes about what you've tried, what worked and what didn't work, so that you end up with almost like it is like a notebook, which could be like a recipe that you share with others. So in a teaching context, you might take people through step by step with interactive code blocks, so that people can not just read something and then try it out on their machine, but rather can be reading what to do and then see a live example and try it out as they go. That the notebook format is also useful for documenting your own work. If you're working on something that is tricky, and it sounds like Kyle's work falls into this boat, where you're trying to document your process as you go, and you might have to step away for a weekend or for 6 months from a research project, which I think we've all done before, having your work in a notebook format can be useful in terms of getting back up and running again and knowing where you're at, where you were at with the project and what you've tried before, so you don't end up sort of trying to work that out and maybe go down some of the dark alleys again that you had already tried. That's also useful too for documentation if you're working with a large team to say, okay, here's what we tried before, and here's where we're at now. That the notebook format can be useful. There are lots of notebooks out there. I think the one that might be most familiar to people, if you have worked with notebooks before, would be Jupyter notebooks. So there are notebook-like tools that are designed to work with Python, with R. Voyant uses a JavaScript-like notation, and it's one of the only notebooks that I know that runs completely again in the browser, so that people don't have to download external packages or other sort of outstanding software or libraries. It runs directly in your browser. To work with it, it does require like getting a handle on JavaScript notation. I like that this is what they have decided on tool-wise, in that in addition to Python, I think like JavaScript is the other notation type that folks will be most likely to already be familiar with. That said, you don't have to already be good at JavaScript and have like spent time designing, you know, websites in a like 1990s way, which is actually also, side note, the most sustainable way. Future toolboxes on this and soapboxes from me. But rather actually you can learn that notation through using something like Spiral and then take it out into other contexts, because it's a fairly ubiquitous notation type that exists out in the world. So in the slides that follow, I'm going to like introduce JavaScript notation. That's said in like a hour-and-a-half long workshop. If this is completely new to folks, I don't imagine that folks will come away being like, whoa, I just really feel like spot on and on with that. But I'm glad we are recording this so that if people do want to return to it again in a more like kind of leisurely pace, you certainly can. Even if you end up doing more research down the line and you end up writing JavaScript and then you come back to this, that can be kind of helpful. My real hope in terms of a takeaway is that you will see what's possible and the sort of value of the notebook style workflow, that can be useful in research and in teaching, even if some of the more fine-grained, you know, trees instead of forest concepts are new. Does anybody have any questions before we dive in? All right. Also, for folks who do want to try this at home, in order to edit to edit a pre-existing notebook, there's nothing like this. Is just like in regular life too. Who wants to start with a blank page? There's nothing more terrifying than like the blank page to write, except for the people who find that refreshing. Rather than starting with a blank notebook, I do have one linked in the slides that people can copy and save their own version. The Spiral Notebooks uses GitHub for authentication. So you need a github.com account in order to save a version of your own work. It's only using it for authentication, so it won't save, like you won't see like a Spiral directory showing up in your GitHub repositories. It's just that they use that for you to identify yourself rather than saving people's names and passwords and the sort of data honeypot that would be. So if you do want to just watch, that's great. And if you want to try this in like a hands-on way, head to github.com and make yourself a username and password that you can use then with Spiral, or feel free to use the one that you have already if that's a tool set you've worked with before. Oh, and why not plug? Also, if you're interested in GitHub, check out the excellent recording from the DH Toolbox last semester by Young Lee from the University of Ottawa library. Outside of the scope of this workshop, GitHub is a great way to collaborate on documents together and to be able to keep a record of the changes to those documents over time and to roll them back if anything goes wrong. It's very useful. All right, so a quick word on JavaScript notation and on some of the terms that we're going to see in Spiral. every code block in this particular tutorial starts with load corpus, and they have a named corpus in here called Austen that loads the Jane Austen letters. That's the one I'm going to be working with. It is also possible to load in your own corpus. It gives you the kind of name, where were we here? The name of your corpus will be something like this. And it's possible in, if you're loading in your own stuff to work with in the Spiral notebook, to then write a variable that renames a long string like this as my corpus, Kyle's excellent corpus, something like that. That makes it easier to type out and to work with. But in our case, we're going to work with the Austen corpus. So here's the load corpus command. We can append methods to it, which are ways of telling it which tool we want to use. So the language of like calling the thing that you append a method comes from JavaScript. And it consists of the act of appending is with a period. And then we're going to be using the tool method that takes arguments, all technical terms, inside curly brackets. In this case, sorry, inside parentheses. In this case, I'm telling it, load the Austen corpus. Once it's loaded, run a tool on it. The name of that tool is trends, and I want to run a query for the word love. For every opening quotation mark, parenthesis, curly brace, I need to have the closing one. And so you can read through and see that for every opening one, I have a closing one. For every opening parenthesis, I have a closing one, curly braces and curly braces. If I were to leave out one of these quotation marks, the load corpus would say, oh, I'm looking for a corpus that is called Austen, closing parenthesis, .toolable. And so like, this is a spot where folks can run into trouble when, and I would be surprised if it didn't happen to people. It's the norm that if you leave out a part of the matching set of double parentheses or curly braces, that computer systems will lie down and not know what it is that you're asking of them. So the first argument that we're giving it is the content of the method, are called arguments. They're separated from each other by commas, is the name of the tool we want to use. Then we can also give it attribute and value pairs. So I'd like it to query, and here's the term I'd like to give it. A little bit later in the tutorial, I'll talk about like where to find out what these terms are. What are the things we could do with this tool? Just as an example, here's one with a series of arguments. So I've loaded the Austen corpus. I've appended the tool method. I've said which tool I'd like to use. I'll show you where in the documentation you can find what's the name of each tool as far as Spiral is concerned. And then for this tool, it makes a network graph for me, and I want love to be at the center of that. And I've got another attribute and value pair, width, colon, this width, and height, this height. So that's something that we could use to set how our material looks at the end. Let's see that live. Oh, do you know what I did not say when we were looking at actual Voyant was how to extract your content, which is just useful in that you may want to, I just sort of in the hand wavy way said this will like live on a website. There's an export here. The reason I want to point out how the export here works is that you can do more sophisticated exports in Spiral. But so I can export a URL for the tool, whether that's like an HTML to embed in a page, a bibliographic reference, or I can open up a new Spiral notebook that brings in my data from this corpus and shows it to me, and I can start doing more fine-grained tweaking than I can do in this interface. I can also export the data. So that's also useful if you've like created a visualization where you've got stop words already pulled out, you've like done some other fine-grained filtering. This actually can be a tool for you to get that material out as a CSV, for example, that you can import into other tools rather than having to clean your data like in Excel and apply stop words with like search and replace or something like that. So you can choose these and export. This is just to let you know that you can get your data out either as a beautiful visualization or as data itself from the tool. Also a handy design feature. That belonged to the first half of the workshop, but here it is here. All right, then let's head over to Spiral. Again, I'll say like, let's go and open up the documentation, always useful. And then we'll also, I want to say there are some sample notebooks that are there to walk you through what it is Spiral can do. The one that I find most useful is the Spiral tutorials one, and it's actually really like the foundation of the chat that I'll be giving here. You can create new Spiral notebooks from scratch. I will talk about how to do this in a moment. This gives you a blank one and you can save your own copy of it and then start editing. That said, I find starting with a blank screen very disorienting, especially in tutorials. So if people want to create their own copy of what I'm about to be doing on the screen, you can head to this URL. And if you have a GitHub account, I can show you how to save a copy. There's a picture of what the saving process is going to be like in these slides here, which you probably won't be able to see on a tiny screen, but you have the link to the slides. Feel free to download them and reuse them, and I will do the saving kind of live. So here's the notebook that I put together for today. Actually, it's here if you click on that. And so here is a notebook. As promised, it consists of text blocks and code blocks that we can run. I'm going to start with just an outline of how the text blocks work. So if you hover over any block in your notebook, you'll get a little pop-up menu on the right-hand side that lets you add a new cell, and you can choose whether you want to be adding code to run or text to keep yourself apprised of what you're working on. You can remove them, and then you have a few more options about moving them up and down. So if you're doing something like creating like a recipe book for yourself about how you created this work, or a recipe for incoming research assistants, this can be really useful. So I want to create a new text block. I get an empty one here, and I can add a text. I could also format that text, choose different styles for it. All the things that we might embed images, which also can be useful. You know, maybe if you're teaching using Voyant, like having an image of what the results that you're hoping people will be able to get would look like, for example, can be really useful here. You can add links, bulleted list, the whole 9 yards. So all the things that we would expect of a little text editor. The other things that we can add is a code block, and it gives us a blank little block here to put in our Voyant code. When starting out, I think starting with blank code blocks can be quite disorienting, and so it is worth saving a copy of any of the tutorial ones linked there, and the second longer tutorial link has links to other ones, so you know you can go through and see how other people are building things to take their code, tweak it a little bit, and start to get some of your own results. In order to save your work so that you have a copy that is all yours, click in the upper right-hand corner on the cloud icon. If you're logged into GitHub, oh, I should sign in with GitHub. Once you log in with GitHub the first time, it's going to ask if you authorize Spiral to use that login and ID to log you in. The Voyant folks don't save a copy of your login. It's the same kind of token that we might use when we use our U Ottawa credentials or your university credentials to sign into Brightspace and Blackboard and as well as Microsoft Word and all of those various systems that we use. That in order for, I can save of what I'm doing this because I own this one, I'm logged in through GitHub, I have the save option. If you are looking at someone else's notebook and you'd like to create a copy, it will it won't give you the save option. You can't edit someone else's notebook, but you can save as, and then you would have your own copy that you can keep editing. So that means that like everyone can go into this notebook through the link in the slides if they want, and can save as, and then you'll have your own copy. You don't have to worry that you are that you're doing anything that will interfere with my own copy of this. But it is helpful to start with someone else's notebook when you're really getting started, because starting with a blank text as a blank page can be disorienting. Because I've already run all of mine while making the test, you'll see that my results are all complete. But that's the method for saving. It will give you a URL that is the persistent URL for the notebook you've created. And yeah, you can edit its metadata. You can export JSON from this and load another one in. You can create a new Spiral notebook that is the blank version, if you like. So that's saving it and adding text and getting the block to add your code from here. To run your code, once there's some text in here that conforms to the load corpus, giving the name of the corpus, dot method for appending future other methods, it will give you a little run option. In this case, I've got load corpus, and I'm giving it hello world as a string. So it's actually running only on the words hello world, and you could actually cut and paste like, I don't know, 10,000 words in here if you wanted to. And then in this case, I'm running the summary method. The summary method has a space to put in arguments, but if I don't want to put in any specific arguments to tell it about like how big I want the results to be, or like if there are any stop words, that kind of thing, I can just leave its parentheses blank and it will run the default. The semicolon says to the computer, stop running things after this. So run this line and then stop running things. And if I run this one, I can press the play button. And my result is this corpus, which is given a number 2, has one document, the document hello world, with 2 total words and 2 unique word forms. I change this to hello world world. I can run it again. It has 1 document with 3 total words and 2 unique word forms. So it's running the summary for me. We may, though, not just want text back. We may want visualizations. Oh, although, do you know what? I should pause at this point too and say, Jada, are there any questions?
No.
Oh, good. Oh, good. There's a lot. This is like a lot of the Prompt and Talking Head show, you know.
Just some thank yous.
Oh, cool. Then if folks are working in this one, you'll see I've got my load corpus here. This is the short form for the Austin tool. You can also load in your own corpora and get a number like this, and a number like the one I had for mine. And I can show you the documentation where the instructions are for like recasting this number as something as easy to remember as Austin, so that you can keep working with it. Oh, there we are. And so here I'm using the trends tool that we've already seen. And I've got my query love, and I've used the text block just to like explain what I'm doing so that I can remember. Oh yeah, I'm appending the tools method, and then it's going to take the arguments. I haven't spell checked the name of the tool in and the parameters in curly braces, and so I can run it here and it runs. And then I could either say, oh, I want to add some things by using the tool menus, but I could also say, oh, I want to query more than one term. Rather than using this, it's even faster to just like type them out here, add them to my parameters. And I mean, you can see below it's run already, but I'll run it again. And I might say like, oh yeah, okay, I like this view, but actually it would also be handy to have a a different type of chart come out of this, and we'll look in the documentation for like where you can find what the different chart types are, but I'm going to add chart type bar here. So I've got the argument trends, I've got the query bride. I'm going to add a comma to say, here's another argument chart that is a attribute and value pair, chart type, and the chart type bar is the one that I want. And now I can get a bar chart back. So I could actually see the frequency of these terms. Oh, do you know what? Pardon me, folks. I think I've led you astray in that I see that it's not giving me love and marriage and bride anymore. Oh, boring. Do you ever have those things where you do, well, it's live demos, just asking for trouble. Well, at least we can get a bar chart out. There we are. Oh yes, here we are. Love and marriage and bride. Good, good, good. So you can define, I should have them all in the same set of curly braces, but separated from each other with a comma. I don't know if you can see that there. So we've got the trends tool, and then we're saying, run a query, and here's the content of the query, comma, run this type, here's the attribute, and then here's its value bar. So that I can set the frequency of each terms. And I can notice that like, brides don't show up all that often, and use this to do more of that drilling down. This is just to try out a new tool. We're going to load the corpus again, and then append the tool method with the collocates graph. And here, this was just to set the width because this tiny thing might not fit on my website in the way that I would like, or makes it hard to see the tool. Indeed, this is quite narrow. So I have to set this to be much wider. This tool is also handy. You can drag things out. Say like, oh, I just want to see who's attached to the term Mrs., for example. This is the default. It's looking for the most common terms. That's handy, as I've said, but the context in which these love-related terms, let's try both collates. Oh, no, do you know what? I need to update this code block. It doesn't actually describe what's happening below. I decided I want to work still with the collates graph, but I've gone to the documentation, which I'll show you in a moment, and said like, well, does it have like other ways of visualizing things? Because this isn't really helping me see the terms that I want to look at, and this isn't quite the view that I want. So here, you can see I've switched out. I'm still using the collates graph tool, but I'm using their centralized attribute with the value love to make love the central term that I'm looking for. And again, I'm changing the width and the height. And so here, instead of getting the 3 most frequent terms or setting some frequent terms and seeing what words follow them, instead I'm saying, what are the words that follow love in, just follow love across the entire text. And I also am interested in seeing like, where does this term show up? Are there any sort of surprising uses? And so here I'm using the contexts tool to have a look at the word with the text before and after it. And I can go into the documentation and read how to set how many words to put in before and after, so I can really see this keyword in context, or these keywords in context. So that's my rundown of like the things you can do with a Spiral notebook. This format is common to other notebooks as well. So if you have an R notebook or a Jupyter notebook, you will see these kind of blocks of code and text, and these persist, and it can be so useful to, you go away and come back, and all your documentation for yourself is right there with things you can run. It's also very helpful for teaching. That said, how do you find out what the names of tools are and what can go before a colon and what can be fed to it as a parameter after a colon? For that, let's head into the Spiral documentation. The Art of Literary Analysis with Spiral notebooks is a notebook that gives you a wonderful overview, including how to create a corpus, how to do some more work. The getting started is very useful and really covers some of the things that we talked about here, including how to bring in your own corpus. So all the saving and exporting and things you might need to know are well documented for you here. That to find out which arguments and terms you can use, we're going to look at the API, which outlines what methods are available. That we were working with the load corpus. And so here you see where I got my example, hello corpus summary, to see what my configuration options are. This takes a little bit of like forward and back. We were working with methods. So there's some of the ones you saw, we looked at contexts. That was the one that gave us the keyword love with the text that came before and afterward. That's a keyword in context. To see what else can I run on that in terms of parameters, that I would click here and it'll show me that query is something that's available. And I can see more of what's available here. So I could say, limit the maximum number of terms in a correct. So that I would have limit, and I would be giving it limit colon a number, not in quotation marks, or overlap strategy. Like if we have text that in the context tool, which is the word with the words on either side, if we have love, oh, how I love you, you can set if you want it to be giving you back like 3 different instances for that because the word love shows up 3 times, or do you want to collapse those ones all together because you'll get the love in its context a little bit before and a little bit after the central term love, things like that. So you can do some really much more like sophisticated, fine-grained work here. And it really just takes a little bit of going back and forth between the documentation and testing here, and then testing some of these things out. Collates was another one that we used. And so here again too, you can start to see query, the limit, the size, and we get some examples of like what we could do. So what stop list, for example, do we want to be using? And how many things do we want to run in it, and then run the terms tool on it. So that is the sort of process for like going back and forth, which would be like, I don't know, like a more advanced workshop than this, but just let you know that like that is possible to do. So if this is your jam, for taking this further, I say like, feel free to start with my notebook, but the one at Spiral, Learn Spiral tutorials is excellent, and that it can really give you a step-by-step for exporting and importing content, working with GitHub, using different tools, editing stop word lists, topic modeling in Spiral, which also would be like more advanced in this workshop, but like can be very useful, how to embed videos, the whole 9 yards. So they really have done an excellent job documenting what's available. That I think for many years, I think, and sometimes I do this in classroom settings too, where we're like, oh, we'll just like throw some text at this tool and see what we get out. What I would love to like underscore is like, yes, you can use Voyant in that way, you know, and say like, oh yeah, here's everything from Shakespeare. Like, what do we see? But it is more engaging to use texts that you know well, that are central to your research, and that actually you can do very fine-grained work that is much more nuanced than I got a word cloud out of the things that Shakespeare said. It's fine to use it that way, but also it can be a more sophisticated tool than it just sort of than it might appear to be on the surface. I must say the only other thing that I had in the tutorial was just if you're curious about like what are some of the ways that people have used Voyant, I highly recommend the Journal of Web Librarianship piece, and as well some of the theoretical underpinnings that shape the design of Voyant that Savannah Jeffries' piece, making meaning count is also excellent. So there, I guess we can take like the last 45 minutes for questions, for like hands-on, if folks want to do some of that work. But also, if you were wondering if you use high performance computing in Canada, if you have used Voyant, you are a high performance computing user. And so I hope this has been informative and engaging. Thank you. And I'm happy to do, questions, yay.
Thank you. It is anticlimactic in the virtual space. We can't really clap for you.
I see the little icons, it warms my heart.
Now that we have the opportunity to invite people to ask questions, because we're not doing the webinar style anymore, if anyone has lingering questions, feel free to raise your hand, throw off your mic, and pose them.
We did have lots along the way, which also like, when you're like in the Zoom space, until like, is this like landing with people? Are folks like engaged? And I could, hearing those questions as we went along was like, oh yeah, people are asking smart questions they understand.
Yeah, it is nice to see faces too. I think we held off too long. We should have used this format the whole time.
Yeah, I do like it too for like accessibility, when like not everyone can come in person, and not everyone like lives in a place where they can turn mics on and off, and that it happens to be an online tool where no one had to install anything, or we didn't have to all meet in the lab is really nice.
Yeah.
I'm afraid I have to go, but I wanted to say this was really useful. I'm going to be playing around with a lot. I've got I'm going to be plugging in my letters to the editor that I gathered and have been obsessed with now for like 3 years, and I'm going to make them speak to me. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
It'll be great to hear about the results of the close and distant reading that comes out of those letters.
Yeah, you'll have to come back and deliver a toolbox on your findings.
I had this student who did this really great analysis for me, and I don't really know what he did. And so basically I'm trying to reproduce what he did so I can speak about it more intelligently, because I'm getting better, but he's like, here's some magic stuff. And then he did it and it was amazing. And then I can't get in touch with him. So anyway, thanks.
Cheers. Great. Well, I must say, for the folks who are here at UO,
Roxanne has a question.
Roxanne. Oh, hi, Roxanne. Hello. Hi. So good to see you.
I turned on my mic and my camera. I'm actually thinking of using it for a personal project, but I'm using Old French. So I'm assuming that Voyant, I should have just tried it, but I couldn't find the document because it's on a different computer. And I'm assuming it's looking for characters. It doesn't know that the word is a word. Am I right?
Yes, it's really using like the spaces between words to find words.
Yeah.
The one place where that like using Old French and Old English and Old version words can be like a bit tricky is with the stop words, that the words that you want to ignore might be different, but you can edit your stop words and even give it a list of the ones that you want to ignore that might not be in the like standard French stop word list. That's really cool.
See, and I can see the advantage of using Spiral in that capacity of being more specific about the query than having to put in individual words. Yeah.
Actually, too, if you have a plain text document like in Notepad or on a Mac in TextEdit, you can upload the list. Did I speak too soon? Maybe I did. Edit list. Oh, I did speak too soon. I feel like they used to be able to. Yes, because editing a list. Oh, yes. So I guess actually you can cut and paste in a full list. Yes, because typing that longhand, that'd be a whole weekend.
I know, right?
Yeah.
It's I agree that being familiar with the text is something I should do way before. I could anticipate all the issues that I run into if I'm not very familiar with the text. So
it could also be dialogic, like where you're like, oh, you put everything in, and they say like, oh, that seems like interesting, and then like go back to the text, then get familiar with the text, and put it back in, and like see with new eyes, that back and forth. Yeah. So
it has to be a TXT, a simple format, right? I can't just upload a PDF.
Do you know you can actually? So I'm glad you asked. You can actually upload PDFs into Spiral, and it will try to convert it into plain text. But if you have it as plain text, then that's like easier for Spiral, and you won't necessarily get the thing that happens sometimes with PDFs where like some of the code that makes the PDF like hitches a ride into your plain text, and it's hard to see like where those are. So you get like maybe like some weird like carets and pointy brackets like into your word cloud, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Also, just on a side note, I feel like 2 or 3 years ago, I would have said like, oh, and so, you know, see about getting Adobe Acrobat Pro or Abby Fine Reader in order to create very expensive OCR. We've been doing some OCRing in one of my classes, and if you're working with like non-proprietary material or stuff that you can use in this way, Google Drive is really great at OCR. I mean, of course,
Really?
the search company is good at like creating plain text.
That's true. Actually, you're right, because when you do a query within, I found things that I didn't think it would find. And it's probably because it OCR'd, it tried to identify words in PDFs.
This is just a side note. So tell me if there are like other questions that are like not related to OCR, but you can set, if you set in your preferences in settings, convert uploads to Google Docs editor format. This is like by default turned off, but if it's turned on, when you upload a PDF or an image, if you double click on it and ask it to open in Google Docs, it will give you an OCR copy that you could cut and paste into plain text and like use. And it's
excellent,
cleaner than it used to be. Yeah.
And that would be better than someone else's PDF, correct?
It'll be easier on Voyant, or
on,
like
on Voyant, because it's looking
know,
for text formatting from a word processor, basically, rather than an image. Yeah.
Indeed. And you'll know then too, because you'll see it in Google Docs, you'll know if like the OCR is weird in some way, like if it's turned every letter L into a number 1 or something. I hope nothing irritating like that happens, but if it does, you'd be able to see it here before putting it into Voyant.
And that's what I was asking about, the words. I mean, someone has converted the actual original text into a document, like so I can probably just copy and paste. But it still kept all the F's instead of S's. And so I went, oh, you know, like it's a pain to read for me because I'm not used to it. But I thought I don't want to have to redo the whole thing. So thanks. I'm going to try.
That's great. It's lovely that you have like the long F's and S's and like that, like, like it seems like so faithful to the original text. That's really cool.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right, great. Well, if there are no more questions, there are none in the chat, I will say thank you to you, Connie, for an excellent workshop, and for everybody joining us online. Thanks for joining us, and we're back in 3 weeks. We have a bit of a break in the schedule, but we have Sylvie Grosjean, who's going to deliver a presentation entitled Prends soin de soi avec l'intelligence artificielle vers une approche de co-design soutenant le développement des technologies d'IA accessibles, inclusives, signifiantes, et empathiques. So join us online or in the creator space on March 21st. Is that really what it is? It really is that far away. It feels like forever away. But feel free to join us in either format, and we look forward to seeing you then. Thanks, everyone.
This was great. See you all then.